Hi, this is Mrs. Baisden, and in this screencast we're going to look at an introduction to types of compounds. So in this next unit what we're going to learn how to do is name compounds, but before we can name compounds we have to be able to identify the different types. So we're going to spend just a few minutes here reviewing how you can tell the difference between the different types of compounds. So we're going to go back and start with where the different types of elements are on the periodic table. So if we look at our periodic table here, if you remember from several units ago, the ones that are yellow are the nonmetals. So you can see hydrogen over here is a nonmetal, and then we've got all our other nonmetals on the other side. In the middle, we have our metals, so all of the green ones are metals, and then we've got our blue ones over here, which are metalloids. The other thing, while we're looking at this periodic table, another piece of information we're going to need for this particular unit is we are also going to be able to go back and remember what the different charges are for the different groups. So real quickly, I'm going to review that. So if you remember group 1, anything in group 1 becomes a +1. My pen is not wanting to work here. So everything in group 1 is +1. Sorry, my pen doesn't work at the top there. And then in group 2, everything in group 2 is a +2. We talked about how these can have variable charges, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. This group over here, group 13, becomes a +3. Group 14 we don't worry about because sometimes they are plus, sometimes they're a minus. Then on group 15, remember we go to -3. Group 16, they become -2s. 17 become -1. So when we go to where we're actually writing the formulas for compounds, these charges are going to be very important. So again, group 1 becomes a +1, group 2 +2, group 13 +3. We skip group 14, and then we end up with -3, -2, -1. Okay, so now we know where the different types of elements are. We're going to look at some of the different types of compounds that are formed when the elements combine together. So what a compound is a substance that's formed when atoms combine. And the reason that atoms combine in the first place, we talked a little bit about before, and that's to become stable. So things that are usually not stable by themselves tend to form compounds, and when they're combined with other elements, then they become stable. Types of compounds are listed below, and again, these types are going to be very important because this is how we know how to name a different compound. So the first type is ionic. An ionic compound has a metal and a nonmetal. The next type we're going to look at are molecular or covalent compounds. These are made out of nonmetals and nonmetals. The third type are acids. Acids have a hydrogen and then some other nonmetal or nonmetals attached to it. And then the final one is a metallic compound, and those are metals and metals. So let's start here by just doing a little bit of practice with what types of compounds we have listed here. So our first one is KBr. So K is over here, K is a metal, and then bromine's over here. Bromine's a nonmetal, so when we have a metal and a nonmetal, based on what we just wrote down, we have an ionic compound. Our next one, CO2, nonmetal, nonmetal, so this is a covalent compound. HCl, our next one, we have hydrogen with a nonmetal. Okay, so hydrogen, this is a special type of covalent. So if it starts with hydrogen, this is an acid. Our next one, Li2O. Lithium is a metal. Oxygen over here is a nonmetal, so this again is ionic. Our next one, hydrogen, sulfur, and oxygen. Hydrogen's a nonmetal, but like we said, that's a special type. If it starts with hydrogen, then it's an acid. Our next example, CCl4, carbon nonmetal, Cl nonmetal, two nonmetals, covalent. Our next one, H2O, nonmetal and nonmetal. And like we said a minute ago, if it starts with H, it's an acid. Water's kind of special because it can behave like an acid, but that is the one substance that starts with H, which for now we're going to label as just covalent. Everything else that starts with H we will label as an acid, but this one, just because it gets a little bit trickier, we're going to call this covalent for now. Our next one, AgCl. Ag is a metal, Cl is a nonmetal, so this again is ionic. And then our last one, Al2O3, aluminum metal, oxygen nonmetal, so this is ionic as well. So again, if you have a metal and a nonmetal, that's going to be ionic. Two nonmetals covalent. Hydrogen with nonmetal or nonmetals, that's going to be an acid. And then if we had just metals by themselves or metals combined with other metals, those will be metallic, but we're not going to spend as much time with those in this particular chapter.